work? Twee toch wel legendarische namen naast mij op het podium. Meneer Roger Linn, de uitvinder van de LinnDrum en nog heel veel andere apparatuur. Er staan hier wat dingen. Hij heeft zelf een nieuw kastje meegenomen. En ik ben Liebrand, die natuurlijk ook die ook iedereen wel kent, die geen introductie behoeft. En zij gaan samen gezellig babbelen met z'n tweeën. Dus ga je gang.
Well, first of all, welcome everybody here at this interview with Roger Linn. And just to lead it in a little bit, everybody remembers Timmy Thomas, Why Can't We Live Together? Which was, you know, one of the first tracks which prominently featured a drum box. One of those things what normally was stuck on top of a organ. And obviously from that we've come a long way until the day of today. With me, Roger Linn, the creator of the first sampled drum computer. Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
I'll just start off with a couple of questions, and probably in hindsight, what sparked your career?
Well, I was a guitar player in Los Angeles and a songwriter, and also a recording engineer, and I would make my own songwriting demos. And I could, here, easier if I hold it. I played guitar, so I could play bass. All guitar players think they can play bass. You know? And then I played a little keyboards, but in my songwriting demos, the hardest instrument to play was the drums, and it was also the hardest to record in one room of my house with my 4-track tape recorder and things like that. And so I wanted to make better demos. And as a guitar player, I used to work with a musician named Leon Russell, who was popular in the States, and a good songwriter too. And he used to use drum machines, and when he first started using these, I would say to him, "Are you crazy? Drum machines are horrible. They're those things you find in home organs and things like that." And he said, "No, they're very good. They have good purpose. They keep the time steady throughout the entire recording and all that." So I said, "But the problem with these things is you can't program them, and they sound very, very bad." And so I worked on it. I had some background in electronics, and I worked on the technology to make sampled sounds. And I put that in as an innovation. And then I was starting to learn about computer programming, and I made a system that was programmable and actually had a computer inside, and it ended up being the first drum machine. So it's kind of, I guess the reason is that I got into it is I wanted better drums for my songwriting demos. And I didn't want to hire those drummers. Those were horrible people.
Well, it obviously was the first drum computer which uses sampled drums, and nowadays with the technology in everybody's house with the 2.5 gigahertz Pentium 4s and stuff like that, probably people would like to know what kind of material you used back then to get your sounds recorded in the first place, because you know you couldn't just call a Digi Design for an audio card, you couldn't just have an N-box or whatever. So they're probably also interested in how do you manage to capture the sounds?
Oh, it was a horrible system. It was an early computer. It was called Polymorphic Systems, and this is one of the first microcomputers. And I had an 8-bit sampler, effectively called an analog to digital converter. And it was very poorly designed because I designed it. The noise was bad, and actually only got about 6 bits that really worked well. And the sampling rate, I think, was 27 kilohertz, which is absolutely hideous. When you sample that low, as many of you may know, you get no high frequencies. Because you're supposed to filter off everything a little bit less than 1/2 the sampling frequency. But that made all the drums sound very dull. So to make it sound brighter, I just left the filters out on the output, and so all this horrible digital noise sounded kind of like a snare drum and a hi-hat. So it was just a bunch of tricks. And my competitors were saying, "How do you get it to sound so crisp?" I said, "That's a trade secret."
So you kind of faked your way to history. Also, obviously, getting the sounds, you had to have a session musician playing those sounds. Could you tell us something about what a session looked like back then?
It was hilarious. I would rent the studio time, and I'd have the drummer come in, and he has his drum set up, and I said, just give me the sound of the snare drum. And he'd hit it once. I said, thank you very much. That's all we need. Could you, next drummer, please? And that's all they did. All I needed was one recording of a snare drum, one recording of a bass drum, one recording of a hi-hat. And they'd bring in different snare drums and give me different sounds. But the very earliest recordings, at the time I was just a starving musician in Los Angeles, and my housemate was a drummer who used to play with, do you remember a guy named Gary Wright? My Love is Alive, so. I can tell everyone here recognizes the song immediately. Well, he used to play with Peter Frampton too, another great, talented person from history, famous for making talk box sounds. Anyway, my housemate was this guy, this drummer that played with Peter Frampton and Gary Wright, named Art Wood, and so we had some of our equipment shared in one of the rooms in the house, and. So we had the studio there, and so there was a closet, and that was our sound booth, and I had him stand in the closet and hit the snare drum once and record it, and that was the original snare drum on it. Now, the way I got other sounds, and that was well before the release of the company, but the way I got other sounds, it was, and this is an idea my girlfriend had at the time, she was very shrewd, I gotta say, we allowed people to send tapes in, and we said, out of the kindness of our hearts, we will convert your tapes into custom chips for your own drum machine. But if you don't mind, we'll just keep those sounds in our library and make them available to other people, which we did. And we had big stars sending in and their drum sound tapes, and we were converting the chips and making them available. So it was very nice. We got a big library very quick.
What we've got here on the table is the very first drum computer, the one on the right. That's the very first one which was released, and a drum computer which probably still is used by people like Prince, and he used it extensively. And also the clap sound, they're such a familiar sound that even if you hear it now, you can straight away recognize it as being from one of the first, from the first one, first drum computer. I'm only the MPC-60 is connected. Only that one's just on. I haven't plugged it in into the sound system because just sticking it there and not even have a plug in there was kind of blasphemous. So. The reason why you made it obviously was, getting a proper drum sound and a proper rhythm, which was programmable for your own productions. But how did it feel when the first pop tracks came out? When the first tracks hit the hit parades with a session drummer called Linn, which sounded very familiar.
Well, it felt great. Obviously, I never thought it would be as successful as it did. So when it appeared on hit records, I remember driving in my car and I heard it on a record at the time, and it felt wonderful. At the time I still thought of myself as a guitar player and a songwriter, and it was a little bit difficult at first because a lot of the big stars that I couldn't even get auditions with as a guitar player would be calling me and wanting with these drum machines. I said, you don't understand, I'm a guitar player. I'm not, that's good, but can we get one of those drum machines? But you have to ride the horse in the direction it's going. So yeah, it felt wonderful. And then they just kept growing in number, and it seemed like, the original machine, there were only about 550 of them made, but it seemed like the only people that had them were big stars. It was wonderful. So it was on all these hits during the 80s.
That was the first one. Then came the second. That was the LM-1, and a couple of years later, let me see. I just wrote it down. The LM-2. No, the LM-1 started. This one, what was the first one actually called?
It's called the LM-1 drum.
And the second one was just the 2. The LinnDrum. Oh, that's right. Because I myself started using the LinnDrum in 1982, and probably making some dance music which probably would horrify you to bits. So I was actually lucky to get into drum computers so early, because people who kind of despised them for a longer period got on that bandwagon eventually later, and by the time they got on, people that were using the drum computers for a couple of years already, they were much further. They were past the point of struggling with the machine, and they could actually program some clever drum bits and also some drum patterns in a fashion which a normal drummer would play them. And at a certain point in time, people discovered that you could also pitch the drums, and Prince also extensively made use of that in tracks like When Doves Cry, where you hear that the low sound, which is actually the side stick of the LinnDrum tuned way down low. And in 1982, the LinnDrum was released, and we've heard that the first one you left away the filters, and in the second one the sound quality obviously was better. You also had the rides and the cymbal in there. And could you tell us something about the technique behind that one and the progress you made from the first to the second?
Well, yeah, one of the improvements was cymbals. You have to understand with sampling, you're sampling into computer memory. Well, back in the early 1980s, computer memory was very expensive. And so the longer the sound, the more expensive it became. Now, a bass drum is pretty easy. Boom, that's it. It's very, very short. Or a snare drum. Or a closed hi-hat, the same thing. But if you have a cymbal, it lasts for quite a while. And I think the cymbal we had originally, we would cut it off after about 3/4 seconds, something like that. So it was pretty poor at that, like that. So I left the cymbals off the original machine because the cost was prohibitive. But for the next product, the second product, the LinnDrum, at this point, computer memory was starting to come down because of all the advances in technology and the increased demand for it, and therefore the lower prices. So we were able to put the cymbals in. So the main advantages of the LinnDrum were the cymbals, a general higher quality, although they were still 8-bit sampling. But I think I learned a little bit better about how to make better recordings. I had more recordings in my library that I stole from all those stars that sent their tapes in. And also the operating system was a little bit more refined. It did more things. What they are, I can't remember right now, but it was better, I can tell you that. But the other thing too, it was cheaper. When the LM-1 came out, it originally sold for $5,000 US. And when the second product, the LinnDrum, came out, it sold for $3,000, and then later $2,500. So a big part of the advantage was making it cheaper, so more people could buy it, and there were 10 times as many sold for that reason.
Another little technical question about the drum computer. Not only was the LinnDrum, the LM-1 and the LinnDrum, two of the very first drum computers using sample sounds, they are still today, till this date, very tight sounding drum computers, because the Linn were obviously engineered before the time of MIDI. So you probably also had a different kind of rhythmically addressing or triggering the sounds.
Well, yeah, when I actually wrote the software on the first two products, the LM-1 and the LinnDrum, it was all done in what's called assembly language, which is the fastest possible way you can program a computer, because you have to actually think and write your code like a computer. You can't use a higher level language like C is not the higher level language, or Pascal, or basic other languages. So it was very important for me to write the software so that when the drum was supposed to play, it would play almost immediately. And it took some tricks to do that. And a lot of you mentioned using sequencers with external samplers through MIDI. For example, someone will use a sequencer like VST running on a PC or a Mac, then go out through the MIDI connector and then out to the sampler. Well, there's lots of opportunities to screw up the timing of that. The timing in a PC or a Mac, it's better on a Mac, but still, those computers have so many things they have to do, and they have so many things they have to make sure that get done in a certain amount of time that those poor little music programs just they have to get in line with everything else. And sometimes there's some substantial delays on getting the MIDI information out there. So you've got that problem. You've got the actual delays in MIDI itself are not that bad. But then on the sampler end, sometimes, depending on which sampler it is, you can have some delays on that end. But you add all those up, and the timing can be quite ragged. And I know even Bruce Swedien, who was the recording engineer on all the Michael Jackson songs, through the 80s, 70s as well, I suppose, he used the LM-1 on all the records, and he would only use kick and snare, nothing else. But he said that, and Quincy Jones said too, who was the producer of Michael Jackson, they both said that the timing was so much more solid, and I thought, well, why don't you use some other drums, But they just wanted to have a solid basis for the track. So yeah, it's a matter of the timing can be much tighter if you're in control of all the elements. If one product has the sequencer and direct connection to its own drum sounds inside, and it's difficult. In PCs particularly, they make they do horrible things with the timing of signals inside. It's amazing. I have a PC at home that I was using for some timing tests, and having VST running on it outbid a MIDI clock. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, good. It's always good to ask the audience. But I found out with VST putting out MIDI clock, the timing was the MIDI clock timing. There would be big gaps between them, and 4 or 5 of MIDI clock signals would be bunched together. Something like 80 to 90% variance in the timing. It was just horrible. And I think some of the best MIDI interfaces, the only way they figured out how to get around it is to tell the interface to generate MIDI clock, but not actually sending out the information. But that doesn't help you with the actual note signals that go out. So yeah, PCs are bad about that.
After the LinnDrum, obviously, the company was getting more and more attention. More and more stuff was brought out using the LinnDrum, and the next step after the LinnDrum was then the Linn 9000. I had the pleasure of seeing one of those machines by Fontijn and Fluitsma, 2 Dutch producers. Everybody here knows them. And they had the Linn 9000 in the studio, which they kind of covered, because otherwise I would start drooling over this machine. And with the Linn 9000, you took a couple of extra steps. First of all, these were just the drum computers, the LM-1 and the LinnDrum. And the Linn 9000 probably is the footprint, the original, the mold for all workstations which have been released afterwards.
Well, yes, I think I saw the need at the time, and a lot of my customers did too. They had the LinnDrum or the LM-1, and they wanted some sort of an entree into sequencing, and MIDI was just starting to happen then. So I realized that it would be great if they had the background of the bass part or some sort of simple parts anyway. So with the 9000. We first created a machine that had the drums and the MIDI sequencing parts as well, and it really worked out very, very well, because drums alone are very, very nice, but you get the rest of the backing track in a loop, and it can be wonderfully inspirational for a songwriter or a producer. The other thing about the Linn 9000 was it had some new technologies that are commonplace today. It had the alphanumeric display, and it had programmable sliders in the front panel, and a lot of things. The trouble with it was way, way too expensive. Once again, I was back up to that magic number of $5,000 US, which is just too expensive. And I think with every option on it, it was $7,000. So it got to be way too expensive. The other problem I had is the Linn 9000 was the first product I made where I felt I had to make a real company out of my company. I had to hire real engineers, because I don't know what I'm doing. I'd never studied engineering in school. So I thought, well, if I hire real engineers, they'll do a better job. And it was those engineers that implemented my plans for the Linn 9000. And the software was just a mess in that thing. It was so buggy. It would crash all the time. And yeah, I think it finally got worked out, but it was horrible. And it was that it was manufactured by my company in a horrible way. You take the top off, there was a hinge, and there were wooden sides. Every time you put it back on, the metal would scrape the wood. I never should have done this. I should have done the engineering myself, and I should have had somebody do all the mechanical work or something like that, because it was a real bastard. It was horrible. But when it worked, it was very, very cool.
It's a nice insight in designing stuff. Nevertheless, well, unfortunately, also from the way I gathered it back then, actually the thing itself was pretty much ahead of its time, and it would have probably been nice to, to have a couple of years more room to put it out. But luckily, well, for me anyways, it seemed that you met someone from a UK company, Stephen Payne, and he brought you in contact with the people of Akai. And that obviously, closed one chapter and opened a completely new one. Could you tell us something about how that went in its ways, and how the first the first MPC 60 came to life, and how the cooperation was between, obviously, you being in the States and the Akai people being God knows where?
Well, it was even worse than that, because the fellow who implemented the hardware, design of the custom chip, was in London. So there was actually 3 different locations, 3 different time zones. But yeah, Stephen Payne was he was the co-owner with Peter Gabriel of a store in London called Psycho Systems, and they were sort of the posh place to buy gear in London. You go there and you buy a Fairlight or a Synclavier or one of those high-end synthesizers, and people would go in and they serve them tea, and I think the receptionist had the instructions that whenever someone wanted an appointment, it was not available. One of those things. Anyway, it was sort of a high-end, posh, snobby thing, but they did very, very well, and so they ended up being our distributors in the UK. And Stephen's still a good friend of mine. At any rate, when my company went out of business because of horrible management on my part, in large part, in 1986, shortly afterwards, it was Stephen that knew the people in Akai, because they were just starting to make their samplers. And as you all know, Akai has done very, very well with their samplers since then. So he connected me with the guys at Akai, and it seemed like a very good match, because they were a company that didn't really know how to create products. Even though their marketing slogan was creative at heart, they didn't have any creative engineers in the company at all. They were all production engineers. But yes, a great ploy of marketing is to emphasize what you don't do, and they were very good about that. So they had no creative ideas there, because they were basically a consumer electronics company that had formed this division for musical instruments, because they saw there was a good market to get into. And here I was, a guy that presumably had some good ideas, but was horrible at producing these things and all the business things, the manufacturing, the marketing, the finance, and all that stuff. So it worked out very well initially. So we decided to make this initial product, which ended up being called the MPC 60. And it had my signature on the front panel. And here's an MPC 60 right here. And it was very nice, because Akai, they made the audio hardware inside the circuitry, so the sound was quality. But I specified the product, and my engineers in Los Angeles wrote all the software for it. And then I specified the creation of the custom chip, which was done by this fellow in London named David Cockerell, who used to work for the Electro Harmonics company, and made it had an early sampler called the Electro Harmonics, I think 16-second delay or something like that, or sampler. It was called delay. But he had some background in he was a very good engineer. He had background in sampling, so it worked out very, very well. The problems were, of course, in communication. We'd send faxes back and forth. That was the era of faxes, and even in the United States, people were using email. While in Japan, everything was still faxes, right? And so I would send an idea off for a product, and I'd get one a week later. We studied your proposal. Thank you very much. But it ended up working. And the system, basically the way it worked is, I would make specifications of the product on paper, faxes, endless faxes, and describe all the functions, describe all the screens that would appear on the display screen of the product, and specify what all the hardware should be. My engineers would write the software, and then David Cockerell in London would make the prototype of the hardware. We'd bring the prototype to Japan, and then the Japanese engineers would basically copy it and make it cheaper and more reliable, which is what production engineering is all about, and they're an excellent company at that. So they did that, and it ended up being too expensive. Once again, I think at first it came out at $5,000, the magic number that never sells because it's too expensive, and because it was supposed to be $2,000, then it was $2,500, then it was $3,000, then it was $4,000, things creep. But eventually I think it settled around $3,500 US, and then it started to sell very well, and it slowly grew, and until the point where it became the standard for rhythmic music.
Okay, later on, at the end of the interview, we also give it a little spin and let you hear a couple of the sounds. Obviously, you can sample anything into the machine, and the nice thing about the MPC60, just as with the old the LinnDrum and the LM1, is that it sounds so tight that you can actually composite a bass drum out of 2, 3, or even 4 sounds. And I've done it many times in many productions. And as long as you don't, put chords in there of 16-note chords and stuff like that, which it also has to manage, you can actually composite a single bass drum out of several sounds, and it will sound like a single sound each and every time. Although 16 stuff is going on, although fills are going on, so it's still, to date, one of the tightest sounding drum machines I know anyway. And another nice thing is that people now, are also here in the audience, will probably have Pentiums which are over 2 gigahertz, which is a Pentium 4, and people who have been using computers a little bit longer are still familiar with the 486 processors, and before that the 386 processors, and people also might be here know the 286 processors, and I didn't even know that, but there also is a 186 processor, which is in that thing, and it runs at the blistering speed of 10 megahertz. And still, it's one of the tightest sounding drum machines, which you still can buy today, secondhand, obviously. As I said, at the end of the interview, we'll give it a little spin. After the MPC60, obviously, there was another product by Akai, was the ASQ10, which was just the MIDI sequencing part without the drum machine. And later, the MPC 3000, which was a more enhanced stereo version, probably due to questions of the market.
Well, yeah, it was answering a lot of the needs people had. The major difference in the hardware, it went from the 12-bit sampling on the MPC60 to full 16-bit linear sampling. Actually, in the MPC60, we called it 12-bit proprietary nonlinear, and basically all it was, there was a little treble boost in the sampling input and a treble cut on the sampling output. It was once again, a cheap trick, but it worked actually very well. So the MPC 3000 was true 16-bit linear, and so it had a much higher quality sound. But then when people would buy the 3000, we get these requests like, man, I want that 12-bit sound. Can you give me I want a bad sound. Can you give me a bad sound? So I told them, I said, if you have a source sound that's very bad, and you sample it in the MPC 3000, it'll come back exactly as bad as you sample it. So.
It's true because the MPC60 only have 12 bits. Obviously, it isn't as hi-fi, but the sound is much more in your face. So it has a kind of presence, which probably is also lost in a couple of high-end PC-based sequencing and drum machines. Enough of the talk. We'll go to the present day. Roger also, hasn't sat around and has developed a new product which is called the AdrenaLinn, and it is a little, very tight, very neat box, and that kind of binds the history into the minute of today, and I'll probably just shut up and let Roger tell you something about it.
Well, I was a guitar player back before I started my original company, and a songwriter, and so I always wanted to make product for guitar players. Even though guitar doesn't exist anymore, there's only 2 instruments now, computer and turntable, I hear. Yeah. So, actually, are there any guitar players in here? 1, okay. We have solidarity. Well, this thing is for guitar players, but it's a rhythmic processing box. I'll just play a few sounds so you get an idea, but I won't bore you with too much of it. Can you hold this? And I'll just start up. What it is it has, I can start with this. We're back. Okay, we're back. It has a drum machine built in. But it also has filter processing, all with a computer inside. And the purpose of it is to process the signal of your guitar or any other instrument. You could run the turntable through it, or keyboards, or voices, or anything. It's a high-fidelity 24-bit system. But what it does is it has a little sequencer, looping sequencer built in, and it runs your instrument through patterns of filtered tones. It also has guitar amp modeling in it. But I'll just play a few of the sounds that it does. So, synchronous sounds, like here's a rock guitar amp sound, but it has a filter that changes its tone on every 8th note. I'll change it to 16th notes. What it does. It does a bunch of other stuff too, but that's enough for the proportion of guitar players.
Well,
I'll say this, I'll make a plug. If you want to find out more about it, you can see a little video of me demonstrating it at RogerLinnDesign.com. It's RogerLinn design.com.
Yeah, well, I think the plug is only more than fair, because this man is probably one of the most influential people, without ever planning it, in a lot of the music which has been made today. And the funny thing is, talking to Roger earlier, is that he's probably the most influential guy in the dance business, in the hip hop stuff. People up till today, trace the whole world to get their hands on an MPC 60 or one of the other products Linn made. And the funny thing is that a whole generation grew up using the LinnDrum and started making music and got acquainted with drum computers, and started making some of the weirdest dance stuff. Where Mr. Linn himself probably thinks, God knows, God help me, what have I done in the music scene?
I can't stand drum machine music. I hate it. It just sucks. The drummer never listens to the other musicians. It never has any dynamics. It doesn't flow. It doesn't go up or down. It just stays there. Some of it I like, I gotta say. I have some DJs that work for me. But generally, I'm very old-fashioned. I like musicians interacting together and forming their own, rhythm. It's funny because we were talking about this earlier. When I made the first drum machines, which I made for my own songwriting demos, I made them dynamic, and I added I created the idea of variable swing and dynamics in programming, so that you could get it to sound very human and very natural. So what did people do? They bought the machines, and then with the hi-hat they did, the bass drum was all boom, 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 boom. And I said, no, you don't understand. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to make it dynamic and make it sound like a real human drummer. And some of the people did. But the ones that did, you didn't know it was a drum machine because it sounded like a real drummer. So the ones that everyone associated with the LinnDrum, the early machines, were the ones that sounded characteristically inhuman. And what's funny is that some of the people at the time that were making records with it, but who would tour with a live band with a real drummer, they had to ask the drummer to play like a drum machine. In the 80s, there was this guy, Bruce Hornsby. I don't know if he was popular here. And he would just put on one drum pattern on the LinnDrum and play it in a loop for his entire song. And so when he'd play in concert, he had to ask her to play that rigid and take away all his dynamics and all those things the drummer had been hired to play. But I'm part of the kidding. I don't hate it. I just loathe it.
Well, for the people into the drum machines, obviously the AdrenaLinn let itself be synchronized to other stuff with MIDI, and not only will it cater to the people, to the guitar players playing live, but also in studio situations because of its quality. And AdrenaLinn, we're very happy to see this new product coming from Linn. The future of Linn. Any ideas? What will be next?
Well, I do plan on making some sort of a rhythm product, but my company is small now. I don't really have enough money to develop very, very fast. But there will be something. It won't be just the standard garden variety drum machine. I mean, I've already done that, and everyone else is doing that. But I have some ideas for some new things that will bring rhythmic programming to the next level. And if you want to know, I'll be having, as I do more of this, maybe I'll have some information or about it on our website, so you can check that. And one thing I like the idea of processing of drum beats, which actually the AdrenaLinn does. You heard with, for example, that beat here, I could have that drum beat running through a flanger. So there's a lot of things you can do with that, and I think that really makes some exciting basis for tracks. But yeah, there will be some drum machine products. If I was smart, I would have made a drum machine first, because that's what most people know about me. So now I'm fighting, trying to make myself known with guitar players. You know. But there will be also some other products too, because the purpose of this new company is to make things that are cool and innovative and that are new tools for making music in new and different ways. And that's what turns me on. It's to make a product that's just another commodity product. It's just boring. You know, so I'm trying to make some things very interesting. So that's sort of some sort of a peek into the future.
Okay, everybody wants to keep track of Roger Linn. First of all, RogerLinnDesign.com. If you don't remember the website, just go to Google and type in Roger Linn, double N, obviously, and the website will come up. So it shouldn't be any problem of tracking Roger Linn. Also, people using stuff like the MPC60 and are looking for software updates or enhancements of the machine can also visit the Roger Linn site to get some more information on that. And well, before we give the MPC60 an old, the old MPC60 a spin. Other questions from the room? Anybody? I think it was crystal clear. Is there anything I forgot? Is there anything you'd like to mention?
No, they were very good questions, Ben.
Thank you.
That's good.
So we'll give the MPC60 a start. You can come up here, look at it up close, and the funny thing is, it is my own MPC60. I bought it for that incredible, humongous, sell my left arm and right foot price at the time. But I must also say it has brought me a lot of success, and I've done a lot of stuff on it, including loads of salt and pepper hits and God knows what, fiddling about with it, hopefully also making some of the patterns which measure up to the standard it was kind of designed for. And as it is my own machine from my own studio, fiddling about with presets and once in a while also adding new software updates. The screws aren't even in here, so I can still flip mine open because it's in one place anyway. This is the first time in years that it came out of the studio, but it still runs like a dream. And you can come up here, have a look, and meet Mr. Linn firsthand. For example, at the moment, it has the MPC60 has the possibility of 32 sounds divided on 2 banks. Not all the banks are filled now, but for just to give you an example, some sounds in here. Then it has the second bank with the dynamics Roger was talking about. You can also select a sound and then select 16 levels and then have it go. So for very accurate programming. The nice thing about this thing is that the approach is just play your stuff. It's a very musical machine, opposed to sitting on your desktop and clicking away all the little blocks and visually making a pattern. This is much more a musician's machine. Simply having a click track, playing your drums, and if something's wrong, holding the erase key and just erasing that one sound, rather than going into an editor, looking where the wrong sound is and erasing it there. Also, that beautiful principle was applied for the sequencing. So if you normally play a chord and you hit a wrong note, you would now go into an editor or matrix editor or whatever, look up that single note and erase it. Whilst with the MPC60, just like a multitrack, you just rewind, let it play, hold the erase button and the one note you played wrong, and it's gone. So it is a much more musical way of composing your songs. Obviously also because you are still composing music by ear. You're listening to your track and you kind of have the feel, now there should be something. Rather than looking at a screen and seeing, okay, I've got the crash there, crash there, crash there, crash there, that's settled. Because you don't have a visual overview of your song, you are actually making a song a traditional way. And for example, what I did, and in the productions I did, is go back to the song, go to the beginning, then put it into record and kind of feel, okay, now there should be an extra fill, now there should be a crash while the song develops. So it is a very, still up till today, a very musical way of making music. And what Roger was also talking about is the feel, like the swing feel, which is possible with the MPC-60. I've now returned this groove into a kind of a swing feel. Rather than just turn it down to the original so you can hear the difference. And the possibility of just having a couple of percent of swing feel in there livens up the music so much, even in all tempos. And I must say that 60% swing feel has brought me many hits over the years. So that's about it. Everybody here, thanks for coming. If anybody has a question still.
Ik zal ik even aankondigen. Als je een AdrenaLinn wilt winnen, dan moet je als solomieter nu naar de overkant. En Amuse is een popquiz. En daar is de AdrenaLinn is de prijs. Dus als je er eentje wil hebben, dan...
Nou, ik zou zeggen...
dat begint wel nu. Dus,
180 graden draaien en vol gas. Nou, alleen de mensen die het hier weten, die weten waarschijnlijk dat die een quiz er is. Of zijn er ook nog meer mensen die het weten?
Ik neem aan dat er wel meer mensen zijn.
Wat voor dikkie. Nou, dan... everybody in this hall, unfortunately, doesn't have the advantage of having this first-hand news of the quiz, but put on your running shoes and or stay here. And, maybe have an extra look at the AdrenaLinn. I believe the price here, maybe Mr. Linn, do you know what the Dutch price will be in euros?
It's
350 euros. Well, that's... I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank Mr. Linn.
Yeah, if you have any questions, just ask away. I don't need this, I suppose, for that.
Bedankt iedereen.